Congressman Buddy Carter, you're a Republican, you're running for Senate. Let's start with this. I'm sure you saw the news of federal agents raiding the Fulton County election office this week. When you saw that raid happen, what was your first reaction?
Well, I was thankful finally that the DOJ is going to get to the bottom of this and prove what we've known all along, and that is that Donald Trump won the election in Georgia in 2020. So it's about time that it happened, and I'm glad that it's happening now. And I think they're going to uncover some things that will relieve a lot of the questions that and answer a lot of the questions that we've had over the years.
Let me read you something that the man you are running to get your party's nomination to challenge, Senator John Ossoff, he's a Democratic incumbent. He said this: I suspect, this is a quote, he said, I suspect the raid is a continuation of this sore losers crusade, despite repeated audits and independent reviews confirming that Donald Trump was indeed defeated. What do you say in response to that?
Well, certainly they're going to find out the facts, and the facts will lead us to the truth. And, John Ossoff obviously doesn't understand what happened in 2020, and he doesn't know what happened in 2020. We know that President Trump won the state of Georgia in 2020. We know that it was stolen from him. And now the Department of Justice is going to be investigating that, and they're going to prove it.
You mentioned, in your view, President Trump won the 2020 election here in Georgia. I know you're not alone in that belief. I know, and you know, that there are also people who staunchly are convinced that Donald Trump did indeed lose that race. If you think that President Trump won in 2020, why do you think the multiple court cases, the recounts, all of the measures that took place in the months after that election didn't uncover evidence of fraud to such a level that it would have overturned that result?
Well, certainly those investigations are important, and so is this one. This one will give us some answers that we've been looking for. And everyone talks about that being the most secure election that we've ever had in the state of Georgia. I would submit to you, then why did the Georgia state legislature pass the election integrity law to change our voting rights and to change our voting laws and make it better? And I applaud them for doing that. They did a good job with that, and I'm glad that they did it. But if it was such a secure election, why did they need to do it?
Congressman, let's shift gears here to another big topic of the week, and let's kind of work our way chronologically through the week, if really last 10 days or so, if that's all right with you. You wrote an op-ed in the AJC last week calling for an increase in federal immigration enforcement efforts in Metro Atlanta. Do you stand by that call?
I do. I support ICE. Look, what happened in Minneapolis is a tragedy. The loss of life, anytime we have that, with Renee Good and Alex Preedy, that was a tragedy, and it's unfortunate, and it's very, very sad that it happened. But we still have to keep focused on what the goal is here, and that is, with President Trump and with this administration, trying to make sure that illegal criminal immigrants are removed from this country. We know that during the 4 years of the Biden-Harris administration, that John Ossoff supported an open borders policy and that millions of immigrants came across that border. And we would be naive to think that there weren't criminals that were part of that. In fact, the countries were emptying their prisons and sending criminals over here. We only have to look no further than Athens, Georgia, and Lincoln Riley. Remember, Jose Abreu came from Venezuela. Maduro emptied his prisons and sent his criminals over here. Jose Abreu being one of them, who ended up killing a nursing student who was going to be helping people in the future. That's the kind of thing we need to avoid.
Let's talk about something you just said there. You said that, in your view, the death of Renee Good and Alex Preedy in Minneapolis, you called it a tragedy. When you look at the way that the federal enforcement efforts have played out in Minneapolis since this operation, I believe it's called Metro Surge, began in Minneapolis a couple months ago, are you satisfied with the way that operation has been conducted up to this point?
Well, certainly, let's make sure we understand how all this evolved. If it had not been for Tim Walz and for the mayor of Minneapolis, who were inciting violence by encouraging people not to cooperate and encouraging their law enforcement officers, state and local officers, not to cooperate with ICE, this would not have happened. If they had not been inciting violence and their citizens, this would not have happened. The left has got a violence problem, and they need to address that. There's no question about that. So let's make sure we understand the intent of ICE here is to protect our citizens, and I applaud them for that. They can do that if they have the cooperation of the local and state law enforcement officials. Now, Tim Walz has called the president. They've had a good discussion. He's agreed to cooperate with the president and with federal officials. I applaud them for that. I served with Tim Walz in the House, and I'm glad that he's doing that. This will lead to a de-escalation of what's going on in Minnesota. Should have never happened in the first place.
You say, in your view, that the left has a violence problem. Do you think that there are, among federal immigration agents, some who have exercised more force than was justified?
The president has promised us that we would have a full investigation into what happened with Renee Good and with Alex Preedy. And I applaud him for that. We should be doing that. And yes, I'm sure there's room for improvement here. And in fact, in the budget that we've just submitted that the House passed and that the Senate is considering now for DHS, we've made some changes. We've said we want them to have body cams. They should have body cams. That will help them and assist them. So yeah, there's improvement to be made. But again, let's don't lose sight of the fact that this is truly a tragedy when two people lose their life like they did.
Congressman, let's end here. At last reporting, and you just alluded to this, Friday tonight, we're taping this Friday morning about 10 a.m. now. Tonight at midnight is the deadline to reach a funding deal to keep the government open. It seems that deal is likely to be reached before the deadline. That's my understanding now. Is it yours as well?
It is. Now, I will tell you that we were scheduled to have a call this morning. It's been postponed until this afternoon. They're still working out some details. I believe Lindsey Graham's got a problem and is holding it up. But nevertheless, hopefully we can get that worked out. Hopefully we can avoid a shutdown similar to the one that happened back in the fall when John Ossoff voted 14 times to use our troops, to use our WIC and SNAP beneficiaries as leverage in order to get health care benefits for illegal immigrants. We don't need Schumer shutdown 2.0.
Now, in fairness, because they're not in the room here to defend their position, I know that Senator Ossoff and Senate Democrats would say that the blame lied on Republicans for that shutdown. They argued that an extension of ACA subsidies was requisite to passing a new funding bill. Obviously, this was a point of contention back then. It's still a point of contention now. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the current deal that is being hammered out in the Senate today only keeps the government funded for a couple weeks. Is that correct?
With DHS. Hopefully they'll be able to pull out the other bills and get them passed so that the only thing to be left will be the Department of Homeland Security. And hopefully we can get that done with some more negotiations.
Congressman Buddy Carter, I think that's a good place to end it. I know it's a busy day on your end. It's busy here. Thank you, as always, for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Zach. Always a pleasure.